Three different sources of sound give voice to musical instruments. Vibrating columns of air, as in the woodwinds, vibrating surfaces, such as drum heads and cymbals, and vibrating strings, such as those of the string section. But whether or not a sound is musical, each of the countless sounds in our environment originates in some object that vibrates. In this film, we shall study how sounds are produced and the principal auditory differences of sounds. To begin with, what is involved in producing sounds? To help answer this question, we experiment first with a tuning fork. When the fork is struck, its prongs begin to vibrate. These vibrations set up invisible waves in the surrounding air. We can picture these waves as animated drawings. Striking the prongs distorts them. Like other solid objects, these prongs resist distortion. They spring back and forth, thus producing new distortions. Each movement or vibration sets up new disturbances, or sound wave impulses. These continue as long as the prongs are in motion. The speed with which sound waves move depends upon the medium through which they pass. We will assume that these waves are being transmitted by air molecules. Every time the prongs move apart, they push against the adjacent air. In turn, this movement affects the air further on. In this segment of the wave, we can see that some molecules are pushed relatively close together. These represent condensations of air. Each time the prongs spring inward, a partial vacuum forms in their vicinity. Air molecules nearby move into this vacuum, leaving a rarefied zone behind. Thus, there are alternate zones of condensation and rarefaction of the air. The number of times a given molecule moves back and forth in 1 second is the frequency of the wave. In one complete vibration, indicated here by the bracket, sound travels a distance of 1 wavelength. The velocity of any sound wave equals its wavelength times its frequency. We can record pressure variations in sound waves with this kind of instrument, an oscillograph. Sound waves are striking the diaphragm at the left. The stylus records the sound waves as a graph. Later, we shall use such graphs to represent sound waves. Condensations cause the stylus to move upward. Rarefactions cause it to move downward. So far, we've seen how sound waves are produced. Next, we'll identify 3 auditory effects of musical sounds: loudness, pitch, and quality. We begin with loudness. Every sound sets up a disturbance in the transmitting medium. The larger the disturbance or displacement of the individual particles, the greater is the height of its graph above the neutral line. This displacement above the neutral line is called amplitude, and it is amplitude that determines loudness. As its loudness increases. Next, let us consider pitch, the auditory effect of frequency. First, we hear the sound of middle C. Next, we hear G below middle C. And now the sound of C below middle C. What causes such differences in pitch? To explain such differences, we picture 2 different sound waves. Here, the lower fork makes more complete vibrations per second. Therefore, its frequency is greater. It is evident that the one with the greater frequency has the higher pitch. The frequency of a vibrating string depends upon the material it's made of and its density, tension, and length. Different instruments produce sounds of different tonal quality, even when playing the same basic frequencies. Each vibrating string may be made to produce different tones. To explain some of the reasons for this, let us observe this string. Here there is no motion at these endpoints or nodes. The string vibrates along its full length and produces its longest possible wavelength. This is the lowest or fundamental frequency of the string, sometimes called the first partial. If the string vibrates in two segments, it produces a wavelength that's 1/2 that of the fundamental. This is the first overtone, which may be called the second partial. Since wavelength is inversely proportional to frequency, the frequency of the first overtone is twice that of the fundamental. When the string vibrates in 3 segments, it produces its second overtone, the third partial. Here, the frequency is 3 times that of the fundamental. But usually, several different modes of vibration occur simultaneously. The result is a compound waveform. Here we represent the fundamental tone supplemented by its first and second overtones. Differences in the audible components of a sound determine its quality. Quality helps us recognize the characteristic sounds of various musical instruments and distinguish one voice from another. With this oscilloscope, we can represent as waves the sounds being produced and see their different modes of vibration, as in the case of vibrating strings. Besides strings, we've already considered vibrating surfaces. The vibrations from such diaphragms are often quite complex. This diaphragm, for example, vibrates in a number of different segments. The third of the principal sources of sound is the vibrating column of air. The organ pipe, like the woodwind, produces sound by means of such an air column. Often the exposed pipes of an organ are merely decorative, and sounds are produced by the pipes in the organ loft. The wavelengths fitting the shorter pipes are shorter, and their frequencies are greater than the longer pipes. Consequently, the shorter pipes produce the sounds of higher pitch. The different kinds of pipes produce different qualities of sound. The organist uses stops and keys and pedals to admit compressed air into the pipes. Besides woodwind instruments and organ pipes, another mechanism that depends upon a vibrating column of air for its sound is the vocal mechanism of man. Here, sound waves result from vibrations of air that start in the vocal folds of the trachea. These waves are reflected back and forth in the cavities of the mouth, nose, and head, thus producing the complex sounds of speech and song. So we've sampled a few out of the multitude of sounds in our environment and have studied the meanings of loudness, pitch, and quality. From the vast number of vibrations that we interpret as sounds, we may gather a wealth of meaning and enjoyment.
You're watching Sleepcore. Pleasant dreams.
It's a green world we live in, and lucky we are that it is. Yet how few of us realize the significance of the plants which make it green. In this color of nature, symbol of youth and growth, the green plants from lowly grass to lofty trees hold the key to life on earth. The beauty of this green we take for granted. The pine trees of northern woods, the wind-shaped cypresses, the giant forests of snow-clad western slopes, the bright, lush growth of warmer places, palms of tropic lands, in kind and number endless. Trees to give beauty, trees to bear fruit, trees to shelter and shade. How much we owe to the trees, to all green plants, large and small. Green plants, green leaves such as these, through a wonder-working substance they contain, trap and store the energy of the sun for man's use. Without the green plants, we could not live. By a process peculiar to themselves, they build within themselves something vital to all existence. For this process, two building materials are needed. One is water. The water particle, or molecule, contains 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 of oxygen. The other building material is air. Not all parts of the air, but only colorless, invisible carbon dioxide, of which the air contains hardly more than a trace. We are all familiar with carbon dioxide. It is the gas returned to the air when animals breathe and when fuels burn. The carbon dioxide molecule contains 1 atom of carbon and 2 of oxygen. Oxygen, as a free element, makes it possible for us to breathe. We cannot see oxygen in the air, but if we expose a water plant to sunlight, oxygen off by the plant rises to the surface in bubbles. Oxygen, however, is not one of the plant's building materials, but a byproduct of its work. If we cut off the sunlight, the bubbles slow down and stop. Without the sun, this activity ends. Most plants have tiny hair-like rootlets, difficult to see when a plant is pulled from the ground. But when seeds are germinated in a covered dish, these delicate white hairs are easily visible. These root hairs, here greatly magnified, are important to the life of plants. Through them, water is drawn from the soil and into the root. Through the root and up the stem, the water passes into the veins of the green leaf. A greatly enlarged view of the leaf's underside reveals part of its intricate structure. Here among the epidermal cells are minute openings, or pores, called stomata. There are thousands of these stomata in 1 square inch of leaf surface. Now let's look inside the leaf. Exposed to direct sunlight is the upper skin, or epidermis. Under this transparent surface is a layer of cells like palisades. In this palisade layer is concentrated most of the leaf's green coloring matter. The small green bodies here faintly seen are called chloroplasts. Under the palisade layer is a spongy storage layer, just above the lower epidermis. Here we see in cross-section a stoma or pore. Through thousands of such pores, air, with its particles of carbon dioxide gas, enters the plant and makes its way into every living cell. Through these same pores, part of the water drawn from the soil escapes into the air. Enough water is retained, however, to permeate every cell of the leaf. The carbon dioxide and the water finally reach the living chloroplasts. Here they are. Many, many molecules of carbon dioxide and of water inside a chloroplast. Here, too, is the key to an everyday wonder. It is called chlorophyll, and chlorophyll is what makes plants green. Chlorophyll has the power to trap the sunlight and harness its life-giving energy. Sunlight, air, water, and chlorophyll. With these, the plant's work is performed. The process is called photosynthesis, meaning putting together or building with the aid of light. More oxygen is produced by the process than is used by the plant. This oxygen is returned to the air and is the oxygen we breathe, without which we would die of suffocation. And what is built from these simple materials? Something not at all simple. By complex chemical reactions, the plant makes a complicated molecule, and bound in this molecule is the energy of the sun. This complex molecule, formed of simpler molecules joined together, represents a food, a direct source of energy for living things. It takes an infinite number of molecules precisely arranged to make just one crystal of this food, common sugar. This crystal is sucrose, though other sugars, glucose and fructose, were probably made first in the plant. What happens to the sugars which the green plants make? The sun's energy contained in this food is required first of all for the plant's growth, for the formation of new parts. The growth of a fern, the opening of flowers, processes covering days in nature, demonstrate the energy plants derive from the food they make. Some of this energy is used by the plant to build its architectural structure, like the veins which hold up the broad, thin surface of a leaf. The woody trunk of a tree supports the crown of leaves and branches. Some of the plant sugar is converted into starch, cellulose, and lignin. Many vegetables store converted sugar as starch, chemically a close relative of sugar. In some plants, sugar, after undergoing chemical changes, is stored as fats or oils. The coconut palm stores in its seed an oil used in foods, in soaps, and various other products. The edible fruit of the olive tree is rich in oil, and so is the avocado. The plant sugar combines with nitrogen, phosphorus, and other minerals from the soil to produce the important proteins. Peas and beans are excellent sources of plant proteins. Other combinations derived from sugar give man his vitamins. Not only the well-known leafy vegetables, but fruits are important natural sources of vitamins. By other transformations, plant sugar goes to form many useful drugs. From cinchona bark comes quinine. Among the other drugs which come from plants are digitalis, belladonna, and strychnine. And still other things may happen, for the plant is an able chemist. The color and fragrance of flowers are made in the plant from sugars. The banana of the tropics and warmer subtropics, which takes the place of bread and potatoes in the native diet, is rich in sugars. The pineapple, too, has a high sugar content. Of the 350,000 known kinds of plants, man places chief reliance on only two, the sugar cane and the sugar beet, for the sugar he directly consumes. Sugar cane thrives in the warm, humid climate of tropical and subtropical areas. Its cultivation dates back centuries before the time of Christ, and Columbus introduced it to the New World. The sugar formed in the leaves is stored in the stalk of the cane. Sugar beets are grown in virtually all countries which have a temperate climate. In the beet, the sugar formed in the leaves is stored in the long white root. Trains and trucks bring the beets from field to factory, where sugar is extracted from them. The food which the green plants make is their direct source of energy. It enables grasses to grow tall as trees, like the bamboos. In some countries, they attain a height of more than 100 feet. The strange saguaro, the giant cactus of the Arizona desert, in the place of leaves which give off water, has developed in its trunk organs to store water. Having no leaves, this adaptable plant makes its food in the tough skin. Like the saguaro, the smaller cacti grow sharp spines. These spines protect them from animals which would eat them for the moisture they store. The energy of some plants is sufficient to move rocks. And this energy can be destructive to other plants. The strangling fig, wrapping itself around the great live oak, may finally kill the older tree. The wood of these great trees is derived from the sugars made in the leaves. This food, then, is a building material as well as a source of energy. It was a building material for the oldest and largest of living things, the giant sequoias of California, 4,000 years old and more, and 300 feet high. Here, reconstructed with great skill, are the remains of animals which lived in past ages, many millions of years ago, long before man inhabited the earth. As animals live from plants today, these prehistoric monsters, too, derived their sustenance from plants. Then, as today, even the carnivorous animals, eating the flesh of other animals which lived on plants, in the last analysis, were dependent on the plants for their food. And here, embedded in rock, are the fossils of plants which lived in those remote ages. These prehistoric plants were once green and made their own food, the basic food of nature, just as the green plants do today. But they are more than relics of past ages. From such plant remains, buried in the earth for millions of years, come the world's sources of industrial power. Coal is one of these sources of energy. Coal is a fossil fuel found in the Earth's crust and formed of plants that lived ages ago. Petroleum is the other source. Oil in the earth originated from plants and animals, and, like coal, it represents the energy from the sun, stored in sugars made by green plants which grew millions and millions of years ago. This stored energy is set free when coal and oil burn. Man uses it to drive his great industries. To heat his buildings. To light his world at night. To power his locomotion by land. By sea. This, the power of our complex age, we owe to the green plants. Green plants and what they do with water and air in the sunlight. Green leaves and the wonder worker in them, the sun-trapped chlorophyll. The sun's energy caught and fixed in a gleaming sugar crystal. Green plants' gift to the living world. Food of nature, food of man, source of his development and power through the ages.
You're watching Sleepcore, media for insomnia.
What does it say, John? Oh, I can't find my
It says gifts of the sun.
gifts. Well, what are they going to give us?
The air, if you're not quiet.
Starring apricots, peaches, prunes, raisins, dried by the sun. Oh, produced by Del Monte. John,
Yes,
who are those people?
hitchhikers going along for the ride.
Oh. Narrated by Dr. Sunshine. Oh, well, that's silly.
No, it isn't, Mary. This is one story the sun tells better than anyone else. You know, it's a big job to be the sun. There are a lot of climates, a lot of countries to look after, to keep vigorous and healthy. I do right well at it, too, if I do say so myself. But down there in one corner of the earth is a spot called California, where I've been, well, sort of extra liberal with my talent. Why? Well, they've got some soil and water just suited to growing things, fruit trees especially. When I spot a setup like that, tailor-made, you might say, I just naturally pour it on, with the result that if you set out to find the best apricots on Mother Earth, you'd sooner or later end up there, in a place called the Santa Clara Valley. Close by, in the same peaceful region, you'd run into the world's finest prunes, with a bloom of health on their cheeks that I put there by hand. For plump, flavorful peaches, you'd head for the Sacramento and San Joaquin Valley. There you'd find them in abundance, tender, mellow, and full of flavor. For the world's finest grapes, you'd look to the San Joaquin Valley, rightfully called the grape basket of a nation, and your mouth would simply water over those luscious amber morsels, just bursting their skins with sugar and goodness. Now, proud as I am of this job, I don't want to seem boastful about my end of it. After all, I have to work with earth and water to produce this wonderful fruit. Then it's up to men to use it wisely. One of the wise ways they found long centuries ago is the preservation of fruit by drying. I want to tell you about that. Now, I've seen a lot of fruit drying in my time, but the best job I know is done under the eagle eye of Del Monte, one of the world's great factors in the dried fruit industry. So follow closely and see how Del Monte puts me, old Dr. Sunshine, on their dried fruit payroll. Of course, to produce good dried fruit, you've got to begin with good, sound, fresh fruit. That's important.
Why, I always thought dried fruit was just the leftovers.
Leftovers, Mary? Not a bit of it. Much of California's finest fruit is grown especially for drying. 70% of her apricots and raisin grapes, more than half her freestone peaches, almost her entire prune crop. Does that look like leftovers? No, ma'am. Dried fruit is a mainline industry from start to finish. Year after year, I've watched Del Monte buyers go out to those favored fruit-growing regions and literally comb them over, buying only the better crops for their dried fruit pack. As a result of this, and I can vouch for it, Del Monte quality is built on selected fruit. Of course, selected fruit means more than fruit from favored areas. It also means fruit of perfect ripeness, and I'll tell you why. If it isn't ripe and just about running over with sugar and sweetness, it's no good for drying. The resulting product will be flat and tasteless. There's no second guess on a deal like that. Fruit is either ripe or it isn't, and you can't hang it back to ripen once you pick it too soon. So Del Monte stipulates that constant checks be made in the field. Ripeness is the rule, full sugar content the measuring stick on any and all fruit earmarked Del Monte. Not until those plump parcels of nature are almost bursting with sugar is the go-ahead given the pickers. That's the way it is with peaches, grapes, and apricots. It's up to men to time the ripeness. But over in the prune department, I hold the stopwatch myself. The prunes sit up there basking in my warm rays until sugar content reaches a peak. That's the instant of perfect ripeness. At that moment, I kind of press a button and the prune lets go. Before they parachute to earth, the soil is carefully prepared so they land on a nice soft cushion. When the pickers gather them up by hand, each prune is perfectly ripe, and that's a fact. Selected fruit destined for Del Monte. But Del Monte selection means more than favored areas or ripe perfection. It also applies to the care with which the fruit is dried. So let's hop along and watch the drying.
Why don't they hold still? Don't they want to be dried?
Hold your horses, John. This is a special step for prunes before they go to the dry yard. They get dipped here in a mild alkaline bath which checks the skins with microscopic cracks. Out in the dry yard, those unseen cracks become tiny escape valves for moisture. As I turn on the heat, they speed up evaporation, and nothing is lost but the moisture.
John,
What now?
do you think all the moisture is taken out?
Oh, ask the doctor.
No, Mary, not all the moisture, but most of it. And here's why. Fresh fruits contain some 70 to 85% water. If all this were left in, the fruit in time would spoil. So by drying, we reduce the moisture to about 15 or 20%. Just enough is left in to form a concentrated syrup, so high in sugar content that it acts as a natural preservative. The fruit, if properly handled and protected, will keep for a long, long time. Okay?
Okie dokie, Doctor.
Now, in drying raisins, no alkaline bath is needed. As a matter of fact, grapes can be left on the vines and I'll turn them into raisins right there. But growers have learned that I work faster and better if the fruit is picked and laid in the open. So the rich, ripe clusters are placed on trays right in the vineyards, and I proceed to concentrate their sugars. With peaches and apricots, things are a bit more complicated. These fruits go from orchard direct to cutting tables, after which they're fully qualified to say, "Let me tell you about my operation." Halved and pitted, those ripe golden beauties will give up their moisture quickly and without a struggle. Now here's where science comes to the aid of sunshine. If this fruit went directly to the dry yard, certain undesirable changes would take place. To forestall those changes, it is treated in tightly closed rooms with fumes of burning sulfur.
Sulfur? Wait a minute, Doctor. My wife likes untreated dried fruit.
She wouldn't if she knew the facts, John, and I'll tell you why. In the first place, the purpose of the treatment is to stabilize the color of the fruit. In the second place, to stabilize its valuable vitamin C content. The only known practical agent to accomplish this needed job is fumes from burning sulfur. Del Monte uses this approved method because it gives protection without penalty to taste, food value, and quality. When sunbath time comes, those orchard queens stretch out and relax like bathing beauties at the beach. Then I take over, removing the moisture little by little, but leaving intact all the food value in the fruit. Of course, there's no thermostatic control on me, Dr. Sunshine. So Mr. Grower has to watch the timing and take the fruit in at the prime of condition. And, in the case of raisins, give me an even chance on both sides of the stack. So you see how it is. I take 3 to 6 pounds of fresh fruit, depending on variety, and with the help of the grower, reduce it to 1 pound of dried fruit. Then my work is done. Our selected fruit is ready for the packing house and Del Monte. If I tried to tell you in one word the secret of Del Monte quality, that word would be control. Control built on countless safeguards of careful grading, of cleanliness, of minute inspections and scientific processing. Del Monte control begins at the front door of the packing house. Here prunes get a vigorous shaking to remove twigs, leaves, and twine. All fruits are test graded for size and quality, but that's hardly a start. Del Monte knows that to every purchaser, the size and uniformity of dried fruit are mighty important. To catalog it, Del Monte really goes to town. Not by guess, not by human say-so, but by the unfailing accuracy of machines. Fast mechanical shakers that jog the fruit along to the first trap door that fits. Bingo, it plops through, automatically classified to uniform sizes. When Del Monte labels say fruit is such and such a size, this machine's the guarantee, and it just can't miss. Of course, that's only size. It doesn't say anything about quality of the fruit. I'll come to that later. Another chapter in control is raisin stemming. After the sweet, meaty raisins have been removed from their main stems and accurately graded for size, Del Monte goes after the cap stems, those stubborn little fellows that buckle Mr. Raisin to the main stem. For this, another machine goes into action. Inside its whirling meshes, raisins play a game of crack the whip. Raisins travel one way, stems fly off the other. And is this a boon to housewives?
Just think, John, in the old days I had to pick over every raisin and pull those pesky stems by hand.
More cleanliness control. This is not a raisin racetrack, but a series of powerful magnets. Del Monte guarantees it won't pull the iron out of the raisin.
That's a gag, Mary, in case you didn't know.
Right, John, but it does remove any nails or bits of iron that sneaked in from the drying trays or lug boxes. Next, Del Monte goes after fifth columnists, any little stones and pebbles that try to pretend they're raisins. That's easy. They're taken with the raisins for a swim in a fresh water washer. Pebbles are trapped at the bottom, and that's the end of that. So it is with every dried fruit in the Del Monte line, cleansed time and time again with special equipment tailored to special needs, doused, dunked, plunged, and bathed in fresh water changed by the second, whirled in efficient rotary washers so fast they must be slowed for the camera to see them. They're back scrubbed with soft bristle brushes, which in actual practice whirl at miles a minute, tubbed in warm water, showered with cold. It isn't done once, it isn't done twice. It's done again and again and again in every manner of cleaning equipment, in clean, fresh water constantly changed. And when those sparkling fruits finally emerge from their ordeal, they're really clean, and how.
I get it, Doctor. You mean they're clean.
Yes, but there's more to come. For beyond that efficient cleaning, Del Monte takes further measures to preserve and protect that treasured cleanliness all the way to the consumer. This added control is known as processing. Processing is adjusted to the nature of the fruit. For peaches and apricots, it means a last light sulfuring, final stabilization of vitamin C and color. Prunes, being of different nature, are processed in boiling water. In the processor, they travel an automatically controlled journey designed to retain their natural flavor and goodness. Emerging, they are not only clean, but softened, which partially explains a fact well known to housewives, that Del Monte prunes need not be soaked overnight for cooking. Yes, Del Monte control is a pattern of many parts, some of them human, some machine. And of these, none more important than the inspection crews, guardians of the inspection belts, who, with quick hand and eager eye, stand watch over final quality. Past this sharp-eyed reviewing line, dried fruits march on dress parade. Hands and eyes go to work. Out go imperfect specimens, broken-skinned or blemished pieces. For any and all shortcomings, the delinquents are, as they say in the law courts, summarily ejected.
John, what does that mean, that summarily ejected?
Thrown out. What you'll be if you don't stop talking.
What was superior fruit in the field is now, thanks to Del Monte control, superior dried fruit, ready for the consumer. So let's move along to the weighing tables. where accurate weight of every fruit and every carton is a Del Monte watchword. To assure full measure, scales are set for more than the weight shown on the package. This tolerance is an offset to the natural evaporation that takes place after packaging. No matter when the carton is opened, the buyer is sure to receive full value. Now, what would be the use of all this care in fruit selection and handling if the product didn't reach the consumer in proper condition? The answer is none. So Del Monte's protective packaging is a vital step in the delivery of a quality pack. Protective packaging. To Del Monte, that means special cartons for special types of fruit. Peaches, prunes, and apricots take the famous triple seal, the first seal being a specially developed paper liner formed automatically and tightly sealed. Over the liner, a second seal is formed, a husky cardboard carton.
It goes so fast, I can't follow it. Oh, thank you.
Del Monte's colorful label wrap provides the third and final seal. Beneath those triple-breasted jackets, Del Monte quality resides in safety, but still another safeguard is added, a code number, mechanically stamped on the package, by means of which Del Monte can identify all of its packages right through to the consumer. For seedless raisins, Del Monte employs the exclusive and famous wax wrap pack. The carton is filled direct, weighed and sealed. Then something magic happens. A marker passes before an electric eye, which, with a single wink, measures off a Del Monte label nice as you please. A very special Del Monte label, impregnated and coated with wax. An electric ironer seals the seams and locks the pack up tight. Those heavy, meaty raisins are now encased in a solid wall of wax, so secure you could sink it in water. Let it stand for hours, and when rescued from the briny deep, those tender Del Monte raisins would be as perfect as the moment they entered the carton. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out. That's protective packaging. There's still a lot I haven't told about dried fruit. Another whole story could be woven around the handling of seeded raisins. Their seeds removed in much the same way cotton seeds are removed by the cotton gin. Nor did I tell you that an important part of the prune crop is now dehydrated mechanically. The results are the same as drying my own rays. I just thought I ought to mention it. But we've had to travel fast, so I've given you highlights. Highlights that show the eternal vigilance Del Monte devotes to dried fruit. In the careful selection of fruit, thoroughly ripened, scientifically dried, so only the best becomes Del Monte. In rigid packing house control, exercised through endless sequences of grading, cleansing, inspection, and scientific processing. In ceaseless devotion to honest measure, safeguard to every customer's pocketbook. In protective packaging, wax wraps or triple seals that deliver dried fruit fresh and clean to the consumer's table. No wonder they're good. No wonder they're famous. Theirs, from tree to table, a precious heritage of quality.